Hello, I'm Brianna, and today I'm here to speak to you about society's perspective of modern Africa. What do you think of when I mention Africa? Do you think of vast grasslands or the variety of animals? People have their own ideas of different countries and even continents. But making wrong assumptions about an entire country is why people need to become more aware of the different types of environments and culture one place can have. Changes occur over time. Places become more advanced and civilized. So why is it when people think of Africa, ancient African culture is what comes to mind? I asked a few people what they thought about when I mentioned Africa. One response was by Vanny, who said, "I think of pretty dark-skinned women with colorful clothes, that and the humidity." Another response was from Dan. He mentioned missionaries and animals like lions and crocodiles. He also talked about the dances and the drums. Yet no one seemed to think of the beautiful and extravagant cities in modern-day Africa. Let's talk about a country like England. What comes to mind? When I think of England, I picture scones, tea, and One Direction. Fancy and uppity things come to mind. Why don't I think about the ancient British Empire, or the idea that Great Britain once had control over colonies such as India, Hong Kong, and America? What about all the wars that the British once fought, like the War of 1812 or the American Revolution? Why is it that when we think of Africa, we associate it with the past? Do you even know what modern-day Africa looks like? This is a modern city, Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. Does this look uncivilized to you? Why is it that our heads are so far in the past that we don't even know what Africa looks like today? A period known as the Middle Ages was one of the most violent eras in history. It lasted about 1,000 years, and it was the time of inequality and brutality in most of England. This time period was said to be the most violent because of the amount of torture methods and devices that came into existence. The more famous torture devices include the Iron Maiden and the rack. The Iron Maiden was an upright box shaped like a human body with double doors that opened to allow the victim to enter. The inside of the doors had strategically placed spikes that were meant to puncture vital organs. When the doors were closed, there wasn't any room for the victim to escape the spikes, causing the victim to bleed to death. There is an entire millennium of brutal torture and violence in England history. Yet we do not associate it with modern-day England. So why should it be any different when we think about Africa? When you think of Australia, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's kangaroos, koala bears, beaches, and tropical climates. Someone's opinion may be different, but I'm pretty sure that the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Australia is not the historical events that have happened there or the history that they were a part of making. Australia is known for its beautiful landscapes, but it wouldn't be surprising if people didn't know that Australia was once a harsh and rough land. The landscape was unfamiliar and dangerous, and it was a very lonely and isolated place. But nowadays, Australia is described as a place where the Sydney Opera House or the Great Barrier Reef is located. People love to explore the land, but recently the violence in Australia has greatly increased. As said in the article written by Jane Carfarella, Australia increasingly comes across as a place where foreigners, especially tourists and backpackers, can be bashed or killed, and women can be dragged into cars by random strangers and physically or sexually assaulted. When someone thinks of Australia, I'm sure that the increasing violence and their historical background is not the first thing that comes to mind. Japan is a very unique nation with an abundance of history that many people cease to know about. I'm sure many of you have a mental image of things you associate with the island. The main thing I think of are anime and manga. I also think of large groups of people bustling around the advanced cities. Fashion-wise, I think of the lively street fashion culture, not much like here in the States. Why don't ancient dynasties come to mind? Times like the Kamakura period and the Asuka period were important to Japan's historical culture. During the Kamakura period, the Mongols attempted to invade. However, they were defeated, which was a big deal because they were so powerful. The Japanese were a powerful force that enlisted fear in their enemies. So why is it we think of Pikachu and Sailor Moon when the nation is brought up? An article about Anthony Fiola talks about the youth violence in Japan and their struggle for answers. The surge in youth violence has sparked calls for a reassessment of the increasingly violent and sexually charged youth culture in Japan, now exported worldwide through animation, comic strips, and video games. This article was written in 2004. Japan lowered the age for criminal prosecution to 14 and may continue to lower it because of the increasingly violent behavior of the youthful community. So why is it that when we picture Japan, we see Nintendo, Panasonic, and Sony, instead of the increasing number of criminal juveniles that populate the city. Africa is overflowing with rich culture, but Africa, like any other country, does have a violent past. But what country doesn't? We can overlook or be ignorant about the violence in England, Australia, and Japan. But when it comes to Africa, they still live in huts and play the drums with their hands in the streets. When we visualize Africa, we usually remember what history has told us. We remember what their past was like. We think of the Sahara, the first civilizations, and African kingdoms and empires. Despite suffering through the horrors of slavery, African Americans have made many contributions to science and technology. Yet few people know this because some cannot see enough beyond the past of Africa to realize how important the country is today. There have been advancements in math, astronomy, tools, architecture, engineering, medicine, and navigation. A professor wrote that the nerve of the world has been deadened for centuries to the vibrations of African genius. Just like any other country and culture, Africa has its geniuses, and its country deserves to be seen in the right light. People have many different perspectives about many different cultures and countries. But why is it that Africa is always the one stuck in the past? Why is our perspective of Africa so different from the way we perceive other countries? A large part of this is because of what we learn in school. There's a totally separate class for us just to learn about African American history. When most of us think of Africa, we think of slavery and poverty. Why? Because slavery and poverty is all we have learned, so that is how we perceive the continent. We learn the past of Africa, but then again, isn't that what a history class is supposed to do? It is important to learn about what happened in the past so that we can better our future and learn from our ancestors' mistakes. But when we only learn about the past, young people are not aware of what is happening in other countries in this moment. Other than what we learn in school, the media also plays a major role in why we perceive Africa the way we do. For example, Justin Bieber was originally a Canadian songwriter, but through the media, Bieber's popularity in America skyrocketed. Adele became increasingly famous in America after her appearance on Saturday Night Live. Or Psy, for example, who sang in another language yet still managed to be well known in America. There are so many more artists from all around the globe that have managed to make it in America. Cody Simpson from Australia and the famous rock band U2 from Ireland. Lucky Dube is a famous singer in South Africa. He enchants people with his songs of real-life situations. He's a reggae singer and songwriter. Why don't we hear his songs on the radio? It's true that we don't hear every singer from every country or continent, but we get a wider diversity from continents other than Africa. The media fails to inform people about the advancements in Africa, yet they still manage to write articles about the suffrage that continues in some parts of Africa. All countries have their problems. There is violence everywhere in the world. We need to move on from Africa's past and realize that we shouldn't perceive them any differently than we do perceive any other country or continent. I want to end this by telling you to expand your horizons. Don't limit yourself to what you learn in school or what information the media gives you. Go out and explore. Go to places like South Africa to eliminate your false stereotypes of Africa and its culture. Help create a new image of places we may think of as run down. As Marcel Proust once said, the voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So now it's time to open your eyes to the world. Thank you for your time.